Support for this and all the free content of Addressing Gettysburg is made possible by our patrons over at patreon.com/addressinggettysburg. Test your mic there, Bobby.
A couple of us are actually married.
God.
Right,
Who
Charlie?
are you yelling at?
You're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Hello, everybody, and happy anniversary to all of you Gettys nerds. And look at this, Bob, a rain cloud right above us as we start.
It figures.
I swear you can't write this stuff. We are sitting behind the Peace Light Memorial on Oak Hill. It is July 1st. Well, not today, but it is July 1st when you're hearing this for the first time. It's the 157th anniversary of the Battle of Gettysburg. And I am your host, Matt, of course. And here I am with Bob Steenstra, my co-host. How are you today, Bobby?
I'm great, Matt. Welcome, everybody.
You finally got your hair cut?
I got my COVID haircut. I no longer look like Alonzo Cushing with the curls coming down like Charlie had.
Yeah, Charlie's a bit of a rebel. And speaking of Charlie Fennell and Jim Paggenburn are both our guests today. Hello, guys.
Glad to be here.
Welcome back. Oh, sorry, Jim. You got to turn your mic on. I should have told you.
Glad to be here.
You guys all remember Charlie and Jim from previous Ask a Guide episodes, and they're going to be talking about day one of the Battle of Gettysburg with us tonight. So why don't we get started? We've got a big story to tell. Let's get started first. Get us to Gettysburg. Give us a brief overview. Jim, you love the march north, so why don't you go ahead and give us a brief overview. How did we get here, and why Gettysburg?
Well, Gettysburg is somewhat of an accident. Lee's objective is Harrisburg, 35 miles north of here. He'll start the march about 4 weeks before the battle on June 3rd, starts to move west away from Fredericksburg and crosses the Blue Ridge mountain chain. He's going to use that mountain chain that runs from Georgia to up the road here about 25 miles as a screen to hide his intentions. And the Union Army can't really penetrate the Blue Ridge Mountains, really see what he's up to, and he's able to get up here first a couple of weeks before the Union Army gets up here. They're concerned about Washington. They're going to move north on a parallel line on the east side of the Blue Ridge, eventually stop west of Washington to block it, defend it from the Confederates. It's going to allow the Confederates to sweep up here and raid for supplies for a couple of weeks before the battle. Matter of fact, well, we're taping on June 15th. It was this day that the first Confederate horse soldiers crossed the Maryland-Pennsylvania line and made it to Chambersburg.
That's right, Jenkins Brigade.
Yeah, so, Jim, was there like a terrible choice? I know you hate the commander of the Army of the Potomac at the Battle of Gettysburg. Could you just tell us when that took place? This guy you hate. What was his name?
Bob's being facetious because he knows I love General Meade. Yeah, Meade takes command 3 days before the battle, June 28th. The Army is scattered around Frederick, about 30 miles south of here. And a special courier from Washington, James Hardee, Charlie?
Hardee, yeah.
Comes into Meade's tent about 3 o'clock in the morning. And, of course, when a special courier from Washington comes in your tent at 3 o'clock in the morning, it's usually not good news, and he thinks he's being relieved. So they light a candle, and he opens his orders, and he's told he's placed in command of the Army of the Potomac. He's not given a choice of the command. And he's told, two things here. The Confederates are in Pennsylvania. They're no longer on home soil. Here's a great opportunity, to smash them and end the war. Go get them. And then the other part of his orders, which almost seems somewhat contradictory, make sure you keep your army all the time between the Confederates in Washington and Baltimore. So
what are Lee's goals for coming up here in the first place?
Well, they want to take the war out of Virginia. The two armies have occupied Virginia for the last 2 years, and it's essentially an agricultural wasteland. And if you come up here to Pennsylvania, which is essentially untouched by the war, you can gather supplies. They saw it kind of as a land of milk and honey, but you relieve the Virginia farmers of the presence of the two armies. You force the Union Army to come north and deal with the invasion. If you can capture Harrisburg, state capital, it'd be the first. Well, they captured the Confederates in the Western Theater, captured Frankfort in the fall of '62, Frankfort, Kentucky, which is a border state. This would be the first solid Union state, a state that's provided an awful lot of soldiers to the Union war effort. So to capture that capital, Harrisburg, would certainly give a morale lift to the Confederate Army, the Confederate nation. Perhaps bring on foreign recognition from France and Great Britain. And it'd be a good jumping off point to threaten some of the major eastern seaboard cities like Philadelphia, Baltimore, Washington, maybe not so much, but to some extent New York. And then there's the railroad at Harrisburg. You cut the Pennsylvania Railroad at Harrisburg, and the next major railroad that supplies the Western Theater is the New York Central. So it's a very long
roundabout.
Roundabout. That's what I was looking for. Well, thank you. Roundabout way to try to supply the Western Theater. So he had a number of reasons to come up here.
Go ahead. You were going to say?
No, that's right.
Oh, okay. All right. So then June 30th comes around, the eve of battle. What troops are in the area of Gettysburg? What troops are within marching distance of Gettysburg? Set up the disposition of the soldiers that are going to take part in July 1st.
Well, after Meade takes command on the 28th, he basically spends that day trying to figure out where all his corps are. 7 corps, roughly 10,000 men each, except for the 6th Corps, which had about 16,000.
Well, I guess actually you just brought up a good point that we should probably, because Bob brought it up too, but so Meade is only in command for a couple of days by the time the Battle of Gettysburg, 3 days by the time the Battle of Gettysburg takes place.
Right.
So who was in command before that?
Joe Hooker.
And Joe Hooker is replaced. He resigns.
Yeah.
Right. We did this already. You did say this. I'm sorry.
He wanted to abandon Harper's Ferry, take 10,000 guys from there, and add him to his army as he came north.
Yeah.
And he was sort of petulant when he asked for that and was denied by Halleck, the general-in-chief in Washington and Lincoln. He offered to resign. I don't know if he was serious. But in any case, they took the opportunity and said okay, and they canned him.
And then Meade was able to take whatever the hell he wanted, right? Like he was basically.
After that, they offered him. They offered him the 10,000 soldiers. So you could take any troops in the theater and add them how many you need, which is kind of ironic.
Promote, fire, do whatever you want. Like carte blanche, you could do whatever you want to do.
I think it tells you something about the mindset toward Hooker. That they had about as much of Hooker as they could take.
Yeah.
But there's 2 days of marching, the 29th and the 30th.
Let's get Charlie in here. Give us a sense of the morale. I know that you can't be too general, but in a way we can, of the two armies as they're coming up here.
Well, the Confederate morale is very high. They're not in the South anymore. They're going into Pennsylvania. And as Jim said, it's the land of milk and honey. Everything you want's right here. And you pay with Confederate money. It's worth 4 cents of the Yankee dollar. So you get 94% off before coupons. You know, what kind of morale do you think they have? You know, and they're very excited to be here. The Northern Army, of course, is they've suffered a couple major defeats. They're wondering, if they're ever going to win a victory over Robert E. Lee. But once they cross into Pennsylvania, remember 1/3 of the Union Army's from Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And, of course, all of a sudden they're on their home soil. So it's a real shot in the arm for a lot of Union units to come into the North. Here they're welcome. It's like playing a home game. Everybody's happy to see you. Okay, so I'd say given a general view of the morale, I think it's high in both armies.
And there's a lot of Union soldiers who remark that it's nice to be welcomed
yes.
as they're marching through.
They were too welcome in Virginia, that's for sure.
I would imagine not.
Absolutely.
All right, so back to, and Charlie, jump in at any point. So back to the dispositions of the troops on June 30th. Let's set the stage for July 1st.
2 of the 7 corps of the Army of Potomac are either at the Mason-Dixon, they're either in Pennsylvania or near the Mason-Dixon line.
Okay.
And the remainder are in northern Maryland, spread from about New Windsor, Maryland, over toward Manchester to Emmitsburg, about 10 miles south.
So Manchester would be, what, 35 or so miles southeast
about
of here?
25, 27 miles from here, Charlie,
so
right?
A little less than 30.
A little less than 30, okay.
Yeah.
Actually,
about a marathon.
Yeah.
The 12th Corps spent the night of the 30th too inside by Littlestown area.
Yeah, it's some of it's a little north of Littlestown,
right,
and some of it's a little south. Remember, they had marched up trying to get to Hanover because they heard a battle there. That's June 30th.
Right, Stuart's cavalry,
and so they were strung out there along the Hanover. Littlestown Road.
And it's important, I guess, to mention that there's a cavalry battle over in Hanover on June 30th, around the same time that Buford is arriving here in Gettysburg, and Pettigrew's brigade is kind of looking over Gettysburg, or Pettigrew and his staff are at least looking over Gettysburg to see what's going on, and they see Buford coming up. So kind of let's start there then with that. So what happens there? Pettigrew is up here. Why?
Well, he's looking for army supplies, shoes especially.
Okay.
That's in the report. I didn't make that up.
No, you didn't.
So he's here. I mean, remember, Lee's here for two reasons, shooting and shopping.
Right.
Until the shooting starts, the shopping continues.
But do you believe the shoes thing?
Yes. I don't believe that they thought there was a factory in Gettysburg.
Okay.
But, people in Gettysburg wear shoes. They still do today.
Yeah.
And they had to get them somewhere.
Sure.
So, I mean, if you look at where the Confederates go through, shoes are always on their want list.
So shoes was a thing, but they were looking for them at every town and village and hamlet that they went through.
Yes.
It wasn't just Gettysburg.
It wasn't just
It just so
Gettysburg.
happens the battle ended up being here, so everybody makes a bigger deal out of the shoes than it probably should have been. Is that accurate?
Yeah, Pettigrew's looking for supplies.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So Pettigrew's looking for supplies, and he gets to Seminary Ridge. He looks out, and they see Buford's division coming up the Emmitsburg Road. So he turns around. Go ahead, take it away. From there, what else? What do we have after that? He goes back.
Well, he looks around. He's under orders not to get into an argument, and so he sees Union cavalry coming up. Figures, that these look like regular troops, so he turns around and goes back to Cashtown, which is west of Gettysburg a few miles, and reports. And Buford's men follow him a certain distance and observe him.
Okay.
So the two armies kind of, blundered into contact 30th of June, 1863.
So he goes back to Cashtown, reports to his commander Heath what he sees. Does Heath believe him?
Well, he believes he saw something, but they thought they were basically militia. They've been running into Pennsylvania militia throughout the campaign.
Okay.
And Hill had just come from Lee, and when
Hill's the Corps commander, the 3rd Corps commander.
Hill,
yeah.
just come from Robert E. Lee's headquarters, and he said Lee gave me no intimation that the Union Army was anywhere in the vicinity. And so this was what one staff officer, I think his name was White, called the spirit of disbelief.
Yeah.
They didn't believe that the Union Army was here. And so the next day they're going to go down and find out who's here. Who are these people?
Yeah. And who are these people? It's Buford's cavalry.
Right.
And Buford's cavalry is kind of the eyes and ears of the left wing of the Union Army.
Correct.
And when Buford's cavalry comes to the town, what is he hearing from the townspeople? What's the scene like in the town of Gettysburg?
I think if I was a 1,000th person, I'd be happy to see him. You don't know what these Confederates are going to be up to. They're not from around here.
Right.
And there's a spirit of relief, I think.
And there have been Confederates that came through.
Sure, they came through.
And so the people in town already had an experience with them.
Yes.
And so they were generally polite as they were basically taking things. Right?
Well, they were under orders to be polite.
Yes. So they were being polite, but they were going through and buying things with worthless Confederate money and all that stuff. Okay. So now Buford's here. They're very happy to see him. What does Buford decide to do?
He's going to camp here west of town the night before the battle. He sends a message back to Reynolds, whose men are camped just inside the Pennsylvania line, about 5-6 miles down the Emmitsburg Road, that he's met Confederate forces. Now, at this point, the Union Army, they know Confederates are spread out through south central Pennsylvania, but what they don't know is where's the main body, the main strength. And it's interesting when you go to Taneytown, where Meade had his headquarters the night before the battle. It's kind of funny. You go out on the road to Littlestown, and there's a marker for his headquarters. What does that tell you? It tells you the next day he's planning to head toward York because his latest intelligence is, early in the bridge over at Wrightsville, and then he's starting to get reports from Buford and Reynolds that it looks like the main part of the Confederate Army in Northern Virginia is out here west of Gettysburg.
Right. Did I read somewhere that by that point, he's still thinking that Hill and Longstreet are still at Chambersburg, that they don't know that they're coming this way?
Yeah.
And then Buford's the one that tells him that? Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
And about 5 or 6 of the, really 7 of the Confederate 9 divisions are either in those mountains or beyond them. There's really only 2 divisions that are on this side of the mountain the night before the battle, and that's Early and Rhodes that came together about 10 miles north of here.
Right, because Johnston's still, was he up by Shippensburg
he's still
or
coming
something?
back from Carlisle on the other side of the mountains.
Yeah.
And he's going to run into Longstreet's men and get bottlenecked in there.
Right, okay.
But they just thought it was easier with the wagon trains to come back on that side for security, leave that one division of Ewell's Corps on the other side of in the Cumberland Valley.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
Buford's going to write a note to Meade. I think it's 9:40 p.m. in the shadow of the seminary, Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Is what he tells them what time it is, where he is. And he says, what I have out in front of me, which would be to the west, is Hill's Corps, and behind it's Longstreet's Corps. So on June 30th, he knows that Hill and Longstreet are out there.
Okay.
And he says, rumor has it that to the north is Ewell's Corps. Okay, so Meade has a pretty good idea of where all the Confederates are on the 30th of June, 1860, and he knows where Stuart is because he keeps running into him. He knows the way out. So he knows where the Confederate Army is. And at the same time, Lee has no clue where the Union Army is. He says, and this is one of the quotes I think that's been often used. He says to a staff officer, he says, doesn't Jeb Stuart understand? I do not know what's down the road in front of me.
Yeah.
He's like the captain on a Titanic.
Right. Yeah. Well, okay, that's a good point to bring up, too, for the people that are new to all of this.
Yes.
Lee's cavalry under Jeb Stuart is on the other side of the Union Army.
Exactly.
And okay, this is another thing, like the shoes. Lee's got cavalry. For example, he's got 2 brigades that were left at the river with orders to let him know when the Union Army has crossed, and they failed him, correct?
Well, he didn't stay between the Union Army. When Stuart ran into the Union Army west of Washington, he didn't stay there as a buffer and immediately informed Lee. Lee had asked him to find out, is the Union Army moving north in your front? In which case, you can let me know and stay between them and us. If you find that they're not moving and you can, get around behind them and cut their communications to Washington and their supply lines, you can do it. And he moves east toward Washington and finds them moving in his front, but chooses to try to go around them anyhow. So he ends up getting caught on the other side of the Army of the Potomac as he comes up through Maryland and Pennsylvania. Because they're moving, he's never able to cut across their front and rejoin Lee. So the day before the battle, he's over there at Hanover, 15 miles east of Gettysburg on the other side of the Union Army. And as Charlie says, is of no use to Lee whatsoever.
So, but what about, though, that you kind of winced, Charlie, when I said that about the 2 brigades on the Potomac?
Well, they're under Stuart's command.
Okay, so they're not reporting directly to Lee.
No.
Aha.
And they're reporting to Stuart, and Stuart gave them orders in his absence.
Okay.
And the problem is he put Beverly Robertson in charge, who's not a very competent cavalry commander, because for 2 reasons. I guess he had seniority over Jones, and the other thing is he doesn't like Grumble Jones.
All right.
And if Jones had been in charge,
he doesn't like Stuart.
Once the Union Army leaves, there's no reason to hold the gaps.
Right.
And they would have come up and joined. When Lee finds out that they're still down there, then he sent orders for him to rejoin. So he thinks they're doing what they're told to do. I mean, he doesn't have a satellite dish that he's able to see where everybody is.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So I think this is one of the problems we have when we look at command and control in the Civil War. We can't understand why Lee doesn't know, why doesn't he give these cavalrymen orders? He always thinks they have orders. You see?
Okay.
And,
all right. Yeah.
And in case we don't come back to this later, because this is important, while the events are unfolding here where we are on the first day's battlefield, where is, maybe not Stuart personally, but where is one of his brigades? Or where are his men?
You mean on the 30th of June?
No, on the 1st of July.
On the 1st, they're at Carlisle.
Yeah.
They're 25 miles north. He's actually closer to Gettysburg on the 30th of June than he is on the 1st of July.
Right.
And that's my point. So while a battle is taking place here, Lee's probably his best intelligence gathering arm doesn't know where Lee is.
Right.
Which is a problem.
Yeah.
And here's
sounds like
key.
a huge problem.
Okay. Stuart can ride all over Virginia. It doesn't matter. Because Lee can ask the local farmers where the Yankees are, they'll tell him.
Right.
Are you going to be up here in Pennsylvania? You going to believe these people? These are Pennsylvanians. They're not honorable. You can't trust the enemy. So Lee's denied 2 sources of information: his cavalry and his and loyal citizens.
Yeah. Charlie, please do not alienate our Pennsylvania listeners.
Well, I'm a Pennsylvanian. I'm not, I mean, that's the way you look at it from a Confederate point of view.
I'm just teasing you, Charlie.
I know you are.
We are all Pennsylvanians today.
All Pennsylvanians.
Benign Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania is here today.
All right, so June 30th, night falls. You've got Heath is planning on coming into town in the next morning. Now, the whole division's going to go, right?
Yes.
It's not just the brigade. The whole division's going to go. Was it just in case Pettigrew was right?
That's a good question. I really don't know. I mean, you send a whole division and the Corps Artillery to get shoes.
Right.
Let's hope they don't find any.
Right.
There's not enough to go around.
Right.
So I
They'll be fighting each other.
Yeah, maybe they were making a show of force. If there is militia, this show of force would probably scatter them.
Okay.
And that's what happened 5 days before.
When
Gordon comes down the road, you got, 700 militia, and what do they do? They see the Confederate infantry come, throw their rifles and run for Harrisburg. And I think that's what the Confederates are thinking is here on July 1st.
And remember, he's leading with his artillery.
Yeah. Well, right. That's another. That's a weird thing. Yeah.
You don't lead with your artillery unless you expect the enemy to run.
Yeah. Okay.
Can I posit, though, that he is trying to clear room for Longstreet's Corps to occupy that area? Because Lee's orders were to concentrate the Army either at Gettysburg, and did he even mention the word Gettysburg? I'm not sure.
He said Cashtown and Gettysburg, right?
Or Cashtown.
Via
right?
Heidlersburg?
And he was at Cashtown.
Ewell?
Hill personally spent the night there.
Yes.
And Heath's division was there. Anderson's division, I'm pretty sure, I don't know, it might have been still back by Caledonia. It might have been on the other side of the mountain.
On the other side of the mountain.
Yeah, and Johnston's is going to come into Scotland area and then Longstreet. But there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 divisions that have to come over that Cashtown Pass. And so I'm not at all surprised if Heath isn't thinking, let's just move towards this town.
That makes sense, too.
Give him room, you mean?
Give him room.
Yeah, let's make room.
Could be. Yep.
Okay, so the morning of July 1st comes. Buford, where are his men arrayed?
They're camped just west of town, just past west of where Lee's headquarters is today, in low ground along what we call Lincoln Highway, U.S. Route 30, that the Confederates are going to be coming in. There's a stream that still runs today under that road, and Civil War guys tended to camp near bodies of water so they could fill their canteens for the next day. But they're going to deploy a couple of ridges ahead where the McPherson barn is today, and they'll run a line up here to Oak Hill and probably about an equidistant to the south toward the Fairfield Road.
And he's got his vedettes in a half circle from like southwest,
like a big arc from the Harrisburg Road up here around to Oak Hill and then down all the way down toward Bream's Mill on the Fairfield Road.
Okay.
I think the vedettes, which were, about a half dozen men, Charlie?
Yeah.
In each vedette post?
Yeah.
And they're separated at about 600-yard intervals. So he doesn't necessarily know. He knows the Confederates will probably be coming back the next day, but he's not sure exactly where they're going to come from. I think he probably figured they'd come from the same direction they came the day before, but he's not taking any chances. So, he's had, like Charlie said, they've got reports out here of Confederates to the north, and they've got them to the west, so he's got a nice big arc of these vedette posts to serve as a tripwire or a warning, and to slow the Confederates down and give the main body a chance to brace for combat.
So you mentioned that they're a warning or tripwire. A lot of times people ask me what vedettes are. They'll read the word and they'll wonder what it is. So just elaborate a little bit more. As you said, tripwire, warning.
Just a small body, maybe half a dozen guys.
Yeah. And they're far in advance of the main line.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. All right. So
they're the extreme forward troops.
Right. Okay. So what happens then? How does the battle get started?
Well, the Confederates come down the road and the Yankees are in the way. Basically,
right.
But they come down Route 30. That's where they're, the Chambersburg pike. And a vedette, one of the briefers' vedettes sees them, and they open fire. This would be
Marcellus Jones?
Yeah, Marcellus Jones and his friends.
Mm-hmm.
And Marcellus Jones comes up and he sees them coming down the road, crossing Marsh Creek, near Marsh Creek. He borrows Sergeant Schaefer's carbine and fires. And of course, the Confederates now know they've run into advanced Union soldiers, whatever kind they are, they don't know yet. And so they start deploying and return fire. Okay, and then he goes back and tells Buford. Buford then starts shifting troops that are still back here in camps and putting them in the way. So this starts things moving. Go ahead.
Just remember, Buford, his job isn't to stop the Confederates, but simply to slow them down, delay them until the closest infantry can arrive. The closest infantry under John Reynolds has 10,000 men camped about 5-6 miles south town. It's going to take them about 3 hours to march those 6 miles. So Buford's job basically is to slow the Confederates down. And that one shot, just that one shot, forces the Confederates who are marching down the road in column formation to suddenly deploy in battle formation like a perpendicular line. Well, it takes about 20 minutes to the 3 hours time. One shot.
Yeah, one shot.
Buys Buford about a ninth of the time he needs.
It is.
And let's talk about some of Buford's other advantages in this. He's basically trading real estate for time.
Exactly.
What are some advantages he has?
Well, he's going to use the lay of the land to his advantage. Out here west of town is what's typical of what we call a valley and ridge province of Pennsylvania. It's a series of rolling ridges. And he can make a stand on one ridge, and as he's pressured, he can fall back to another ridge and keep doing this to buy the time he needs. But he also dismounts his men off horseback. Now, when you do that, you subtract about a quarter of your number. About 1 out of every 4 men has to hold the horses in the rear. But he dismounted men, fought behind dismantled fence rails. Buford's men are firing shorter rifles called carbines. The advantage of the carbine is it's loaded from the breech of the stock. You can reload it while you're crouched down behind a fence. Of course, the other side of the coin is that with those shorter carbines, you can't take the enemy under the same range that they can return fire with the typical infantryman.
What's the effective range of a carbine?
I'm not. Do you know, Charlie?
About 150 yards at the most. Yeah.
Okay, and a musket, rifle musket.
What, 300 to 500?
Yeah, 300 to 500.
Yeah, so okay.
So we're talking minimum twice the distance with an infantry.
Yeah, but like you pointed out, though, they once that shot is fired, the Confederates have to deploy to cautiously advance to see what's ahead of them. They don't know.
That's right.
And I think so. A lot of people seem to watch the movie Gettysburg, and they think of the cavalry fight as this big slugfest. But in reality, it wasn't. It was like Bob said, he's trading real estate for time. And he's purposely giving ground, Buford. The plan is to purposely give ground and slow their advance up the road. But now when that first shot goes off, what's the procedure that the Confederates have to go through? I guess my question is, obviously you said that they deploy in battle line and they advance slowly, but word has to get all the way up the chain of command.
Right.
And then a decision has to be made and word has to get back down to the initiating officer, right? With those orders. So how long of a process would that take?
Depends on how fast the horse is. It could take, as like Jim said, it could take at least 20 minutes or so till everything, and then you got to go in the lines. You got to take a column and move it in the line, and then you're not marching on the road anymore.
Right.
That's right.
You're in the fields.
Yeah.
And the fences aren't torn down. Mm-hmm. And I don't care what kind of car you have. I don't care. You can have a Ferrari for all I care. But I can guarantee you this. It's faster on the road than it is off. I can guarantee you that.
Yes.
And so this is what Beaver's doing. He get them off road. He knows that'll slow them down.
Right. Because it takes about 2 hours for them to get back here to McPherson's Ridge, isn't that right?
Does, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So okay, so the cavalry's slow in the advance, but eventually then the infantry, are they starting to get hip to the jive? Like are they realizing what's going on? The Confederates, that they've got cavalry in front of them, and does that kind of?
But it's dismounted.
Yeah.
Cavalry. So
right.
But they'd seen cavalry the day before when they came down. But that was Pettigrew. Now this is the archers and Davis. So these are different troops. But I'm sure they'd heard, that there were mounted troops there the day before west of town.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm saying, does that embolden them a little bit to bring the pressure up a little?
Well, the cavalry
Confederates
withdraw when the Confederate infantry begin to get too close.
Yeah.
So that would embolden the Confederates in thinking, well, maybe this is just militia.
Right.
So they're just falling back as we move forward. I think in Heath's report, if I remember, of course he don't, because he was hitting the head with a bullet. But anyway, I think he said that they didn't face cavalry at all. I don't think he admitted that in his original report that they were up against cavalry.
Because they were dismounted.
They were dismounted.
Yeah, dismounted.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it would seem like there would be more people because they could, like Jim was saying, they can fire more rapidly.
Right.
So
Okay.
you have a volume of fire.
But it is
that's
encouraging them, as many other battles, that they're pushing the Yankees back.
Yeah, they're retreating.
They're still not, I think, too concerned yet, because
Right.
they don't know that the First Corps is about to arrive.
I have no clue that the infantry's in the vicinity.
Okay, so we've got a question from one of our listeners, Darth Etzcorn. He calls himself, and he asks...
Hi, Darth. See you Friday.
No, say saw you Friday, because this is before...
Oh, saw you Friday. We're taping this before our tour. So if I die...
So he's going to hear this on the 1st of July. He says, were Buford's dismounted cavalrymen that good at slowing the Confederate advance, or was the disorganization of the Confederates the key to holding the high ground? What? So I guess you basically just answered this question.
Yeah.
It was effective. Go ahead, Jim. You were going
I
to
was
say.
just going to say, I think Buford handled his men really well. I think they did a great job.
Yeah.
Good job.
Now, so the lines do meet then on McPherson's Ridge, and then it starts to get a little hotter. Isn't that correct?
True.
I can't remember what regiment, and you're currently you're in the middle of reading fonts now, but there's an anecdote in there about as the left of Archer's brigade is coming up the fields in front of the McPherson barn, one of the cavalrymen, they're going to fall back, but one of the cavalrymen gets up and says something like, "Get him, now's our chance," or something like that. Do you remember that story?
I remembered it until I forgot it.
Of course, Bob.
I thought you could ask which Union regiment fired the first volley, but that's an easy one, so never mind.
Well, which one is it?
56 Pennsylvania.
Yeah, we're in
Well, we didn't get there yet. Skipping ahead. All right, so Reynolds, he brings up the left wing. What time is this about?
Well, it's about 10:30.
That's what I was gonna say, Charlie,
About 10:30
All
is
right.
when the infantry arrived.
And by the way, just a quick aside, just got a new patron as we're doing this here.
Happy birthday, Matt.
Thank you. So Reynolds, he's going to bring up the left wing around 10 o'clock-ish. Is that what he said? Who's the first division up, and how do they deploy? What do they face?
Well, Wadsworth's the first division up, and Cutler's brigade's leading, and the Iron Brigade, their Solomon Meredith is following. So they're coming across in columns. They'll get off the road around the Kadori farm and go across the fields. Now, Reynolds has already had his staff tear down fence rails.
Okay.
So that they could go across, and he's directing them. You don't want to go through Gettysburg on the 4th of July. It's just too much traffic.
Too much
so he's going to
traffic.
avoid the town, and he's going to go, and they're going to come across in columns, and they're going to deploy behind McPherson's Ridge.
Okay.
So Cutler's men are going to cross the Emmitsburg Road and comes towards where we're sitting now, north of the Chambersburg Pike. Pike. And the Iron Brigade is going to deploy mostly south of there. The Confederates don't see them because of the ridge being in the way.
Gotcha. Okay.
And the Confederates are now, Archer is on the right flank, which would be the southern end of the line, or south of the Chambersburg Pike, and Davis is north of it. And of course, they're a little bit disorganized at this point because they've been fighting for nearly 3 hours, really. Yeah. Pushing in cavalry, reorganizing, and they've run into artillery fire now. At this point, from Buford's artillery, is 6 3-inch ordnance rifles. That'll give you some cause for concern as well. And so they're unprepared once the infantry comes up over the ridge. Bob?
Well, just that we have 2 Confederate infantry brigades here, and they're seeing 2 Union infantry brigades in addition to Buford's men.
Right.
Yes.
And you mentioned artillery, and one of the things I meant to bring up was Caliph's battery back with Buford. So we're just going to rewind a little bit here in time. Caliph's battery, Buford's division has 1 battery with him.
Right.
Now, normally he would have 3 brigades in his division, but he's only got 2 today.
Right.
Why?
The ones that Westminster guarding the railhead there in the supply wagons.
Okay.
That would be Wesley Merritt's brigade.
So Caliph's battery is up. What does Buford want Caliph to do with the sections of his battery, and why?
Well, I think he wants them to fire on the Confederates and force them once again to deploy and maybe hesitate. So he's got 4 guns astride the Chambersburg Pike, and he's got 2 guns south of Herbst Woods, Reynolds Woods, McPherson, you pick it.
Yeah.
There, and they're watching the Fairfield Road.
Okay.
Remember, Buford the day before had run into Confederates in the Fairfield area. So
Yes, right,
you can't
right.
see the Fairfield Road from where the 4 guns are deployed along the Chambersburg pike. So that section is watching the Fairfield Road. So you put fire on them now, they know, oh my God, we got artillery in our front. We better get set here and get ready, more organized to move against artillery. Bring up the artillery.
That's going to slow them down.
Yeah, we'll slow them
This
down.
isn't just militia. This is now a professional artillery battery. And how many more might there be around?
Right.
Yeah, that's correct.
And it's putting, what is that, Rotor section that's south of the woods? Is that right? Is it Rotor? What is it?
Purgle.
Purgle.
Did I pronounce it? Purgle?
Yeah, I don't know.
Purgle. No, Purgle. I think it's Purgle.
P-E-R-G-E-L.
Yeah, Purgle's on the south of the woods. He's watching the Fairfield Road, but he's also firing on Archer's Brigade. Is that right?
He can. Because
Does he?
a lot of the woods out in front there, he could see the right flank of Archer's men.
Yeah, because Archer's forming up at the golf course.
Exactly.
Right, the old country
he
club
is.
there. Yeah. So he could kind of see a little bit of his line.
Sure.
Okay, so I just wanted to get that in there, that there is artillery, and they do a pretty good job.
Yes.
Because they're also facing, how many batteries are arrayed against them on Hers Ridge?
Well, the Confederates, let me do the math. What is it?
I think at first it's 3.
Just 3, yeah. That's 12 guns.
Okay, that's 12, right.
Yeah.
12 guns
12 guns
versus
to 6.
4, or 6, yeah.
Yeah.
But then eventually it'll get up to what?
Well, he brought the 2 battalions have 48 guns total.
Right.
But 24 was eventually what was deployed on Boyd Schoolhouse Ridge, which is just behind Hers Ridge.
Okay, and that was against the cavalry, or is that eventually later on when the infantry?
Well, later on, like Bob said, it was only 3 batteries initially.
And what's interesting about Caliph's battery, which is the horse artillery battery, they're actually going to be pulled away when another artillery battery, Hall's battery, arrives. Mm-hmm. But then later on the day, Hall's gone.
Yeah.
And they're at Cemetery Hill, and Caliph comes back.
Yeah, he does.
Huh. All right, so let's get back now. Fast forward to where we left off with the infantry.
Okay.
Where did we leave off with the infantry?
They're coming up.
They're coming up. Okay, great. So Cutler is north of the Chambersburg Pike. Iron Brigade
straddling. There are a couple regiments south yet.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So Iron Brigade is going into the woods, McPherson's woods. What happens then when they make contact with Archer and Davis? And who makes contact first?
Well, the first ones to fire are Cutler's. 56 Pennsylvania fires the first Union infantry volley
Okay.
of the fighting. They're going to contact into Davis, probably maybe against the 55th North Carolina, maybe 42nd Mississippi. The Iron Brigade's still coming up when this action's starting.
Right. Okay.
Okay, and then they're going to come up and extend it south.
What's the song that?
The Campbells are coming?
Yeah.
Sing it, Charlie.
No, you don't want to hear that. Yeah, I got a Willie Nelson voice.
Now was that Cutler or Merritt, the Iron Brigade that came into that song?
I think it was the Iron Brigade.
That's what I thought. Okay.
I think it was, yeah.
All right. So the fighting starts now. We're going to get into parts of the fight that everybody's heard of course. Now my phone is acting up and I can't get to the thing. Forgive me. Pause for a second here.
So while you're looking for that, Cutler's Brigade comes in first, and they're the northern more of the two.
Right.
And the Iron Brigade is coming in behind them.
Right.
So there's already fighting going on north of the Pike. What's the first Iron Brigade regiment to come in, and what's going to happen?
The 2nd Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Yeah, they led. They were still in column coming up. And I think Reynolds realized the need for speed. Usually a brigade will form in a line and advance together.
And load.
And load, yeah, right. And load. And he interjected himself into the situation and ordered the 2nd to go in, and the other regiments then will come up as they almost an echelon,
right?
If you will, from right to left. So the 2nd goes in pretty much on its own initially.
Yes, and so Archer's Brigade I think it's the 13th Alabama at the end. I might be wrong about the number, but they're actually going to begin wheeling to their life, thinking, "Oh, we're going to get this isn't the trees now, but we're going to get that second Wisconsin." They don't know it's the second Wisconsin, and then as they're beginning to wheel to get the second Wisconsin, oh my God, here comes
the Iron Brigade.
Yeah,
the rest of the brigade. All right, and so Reynolds, he's not here for very long before he gets killed.
Not by choice.
Yeah. How far into the fighting is it before he gets killed?
Whew. What do you say, about 15 minutes or so?
Yeah, 15, 30 minutes at the most after he arrives.
Yeah.
He arrives at the seminary, sees Buford up in the cupola tower, can you hang on? My guys are right behind me. He's from Lancaster, 52 miles east of Gettysburg, right on Route 30, the Lincoln Highway. Very aggressive commander, West Point graduate. Been offered the command of the Army of the Potomac about a month before the battle when Lee first started coming up here, so he's highly regarded. Wants to lead by example, so he's out in front of his men. Everybody can see him mounted on horseback. He's going to make a pretty good target.
Mm-hmm. And?
Well, he was right at the edge of the Herbst Woods, what some people today call the Reynolds Woods. There's some controversy about this, but the thing that I've always accepted is that he's out front and that he turns to look behind him. The men were coming up behind him from the seminary. He's out in front. Forward, men forward, for God's sakes, forward. When he turns, supposedly a bullet comes out of the trees. Confederate bullet gets him behind the right ear. His aide, Charles Vale, said Reynolds was dead before he hit the ground when he fell out of the saddle at age 42. He'll be mortally wounded, taken into town, and eventually died, but becomes the highest-ranking officer killed in the battle.
And so, who's in command after he's down?
Abner Doubleday takes command. He's the senior division commander, right, Charlie?
Absolutely, yeah.
And at the wing level, although he doesn't know it quite yet, Oliver Otis Howard, the 11th Corps commander, is going to be assuming command of the field.
When he arrives around
so this is a good point or a good time to explain all this stuff then. So I want to explain the command structure with the wing, the left wing. Who's in command? Go ahead.
Well, there was a temporary command structure for the Battle of Gettysburg. There were 7 corps, and Meade decided to form 2 wings. Reynolds had the left wing, which included Howard's 11th Corps and Sickles' 3rd Corps. They're all kind of coming up from the direction through, they all come up through Emmitsburg at some point. And then the right wing is the 2nd, 5th, 6th, and 12th Corps, and that's put under Sedgwick, I believe.
Slocum.
Slocum had the
it's under Slocum. Henry Slocum.
Old Hank.
Yeah, old Hank.
All right, so when Reynolds goes down, Doubleday becomes the
First Corps commander.
Well, he already is the First Corps commander, right? Because Reynolds is moved up to left wing command.
Temporary Corps commander.
But so Reynolds goes down, and as Bob pointed out, Howard becomes the left wing commander, but Howard doesn't know that he's the left wing commander. He's on his way to the field still, correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right. So continue on. Tell the story of the rest of the fighting here with the First Corps.
Well, the initial contact was kind of interesting because, as was pointed out with Bob saying about Archer's men started to wheel in to try and drive the 2nd Wisconsin out of the woods, and up comes the rest of the Iron Brigade and flanks them. So they drive them back. In the meantime, Cutler's brigade didn't extend its line far enough, so it's outflanked, and it's being driven back. So what you have is like a rotating door.
Yeah, right.
Rotating door. And what Doubleday will do is the 6th Wisconsin and some men from each of the other regiments will be sent, as they were the reserve, if you will. They were on Seminary Ridge. They're going to move from Seminary Ridge to the Chambersburg pike. They'll climb one fence, get in the pike, use the other fence to lay their guns on, and fire a very concerted volley into the flank of the Confederates who are chasing Cutler's men back into the town of Gettysburg. Of course, then these men know they're flanked, so what are you going to do? Well, there's a ditch. Let's jump in there. And so they all jump into this ditch, and that's the 2nd, Mississippi, 42nd, some of the 55th, North Carolina perhaps as well. The problem is the ditch goes in low ground, and then it cuts through a ridge.
Yeah.
And so it's too high, and a lot of the men couldn't get their guns up to fire.
The
Right.
ditch is the railroad cut.
The railroad cut. That's what we're
cut,
talking about. Yeah.
It's like
so-
15 feet deep at some points.
Yeah, it's huge. And it's steep.
Yes.
It's sheer, like the cliff.
Yeah, and of course, Rufus Dawes then he figured if he stayed there at the pike, they had the better advantage once they figure out where they could fire from the ditch, the railroad cut. Okay, and so he orders his men to charge. They climbed the fence and charged and caught them in the ditch. Second Mississippi, there was some fighting going on when Rufus Dawes comes to the front. Couldn't figure out why his men stopped. He goes up, he looks down. Here's a ditch full of Confederates, and he didn't quite know what to say. As one of the men related, the colonel looked down at the Confederates and yelled, "Throw down your guns or we'll shoot." And this man related, he said, "I didn't know who he meant was going to shoot," but the Confederates threw down their guns, and some of them started to leave, running back up the cut. High ground matters.
Yeah, sure.
And the fight's still going on further down the cut on the more level ground over the flag of the 2nd Mississippi. So it's a really confused situation. But this stopped the Confederates from dislocating the Union line. So they're going to fall back then to Hers Ridge, and the First Corps then is able to secure McPherson's Ridge.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the railroad cut a little bit. You've got the 6th Wisconsin, but you also have 2 other regiments that are with them fighting,
Yes.
right?
Yes. And this would be the 14th Brooklyn, and what is that, the
95th.
95th.
95th
Yeah.
New York. The 14th Brooklyn on the other side of the cut.
Right. On
So-
the other side of the...
They're on the other side of the
bridge.
ridge. And so the 6th Wisconsin couldn't see them.
Okay, so but is the 6th Wisconsin working in concert with the 95th New York? Didn't one of the colonels say to the other, "Hey, baby, come help me"?
Yeah, the 95th
And
goes
then
in with along with.
Okay.
And the 14th Brooklyn kind of went in on the other side.
Okay, on their
Kind of
own.
depends whose account you want to believe.
That's right.
after
Okay,
the
we'll
war.
go into that.
Yeah. Well, let's not,
What
because
are
we
the
got a
two
lot
accounts?
to do here tonight.
Yeah.
Dawes tends to say it was our initiative, and Colonel Pye, I think his name, with the 95th New York, agreed, and they went. And then the 14th Brooklyn came a little later, kind of
Right.
like an echelon. The 14th Brooklyn kind of tells the story, that we charged with you guys, and so
Okay.
The
Yeah,
6th
so-
Wisconsin under Dawes is the one regiment that's not really involved in the fight south of the Chambersburg Pike. So they're kind of over by the seminary in reserve, and they're not really needed. And they see what's going on to the north on the other side, and they see this opportunity to cross the road and flank the Confederates.
So
Where
they're
the
not
where the
ordered.
cut levels
They're not
out.
ordered to do this. This is Dawes taking his own
the
initiative.
charge. I mean, they were ordered to advance,
Yeah. Okay.
Double-
but
They
not
ordered them
necessarily
over,
to
yeah.
charge.
Okay.
Yeah, but the charge was under
But
his
this
own
is
initiative.
This is a fairly significant decision made, though, because think of what might have happened. Charlie talked about a revolving door. So the Iron Brigade is heading west and thinking everything is hunky-dory, not knowing that if Rufus Dawes doesn't stop this movement of the Confederates coming, this would be Davis's brigade, which is now wheeling to their right. They would cut off the Iron Brigade. And so you might have a totally different battle.
Yeah, and you mentioned you go back to the Iron Brigade now. So he's against Archer's brigade. Do they succeed against Archer, or does
Well, yeah.
Archer succeed against them? What happens?
Well, Archer's men are flanked, and so they fired at least one volley, maybe another, before they were forced to retreat. And Archer gets captured.
That's what I was
Yeah, he's the
hoping you
first
would mention.
general in an army commanded by Lee in the war to be captured.
Yeah.
And he's captured on the other side of Willoughby Run. So there's a lot of stories about this too, but he's supposedly waiting because the run has a lot of bushes, jagger bushes and stuff along its banks. It's somewhat steep in places there, and so they were trying to get through this gap in the bushes, and Archer was letting his men go, and then by the time he gets through, here comes the Iron Brigade down, and they grab him.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what? There's a funny story when he's taken back to Doubleday.
Yes.
That
Well,
is-
yes, he takes them back to the story doesn't hold water really.
Oh, really?
No, because let's see, what was it? They were supposed to be West Point.
Well, yeah,
together,
that-
but they
Last
weren't.
right.
answer.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
the encounter though is that
Yeah.
that doesn't hold water either.
Well, they encountered one another.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what is the story of the encounter?
Supposedly Doubleday says, Archer, damn glad to see you. And
Yeah,
Archer
that's
answers, well, I'm not glad to see you by damn sight.
yeah. But so the background of that story is supposedly that they were buddies at West Point, but they really weren't.
No.
Okay. You see, people like to throw that stuff in just to make these more dramatic.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That's kind of stupid. Okay, so then how does the morning fight end? Because there's going to be a lull in the middle of the day, and what brings the morning fight to a close?
Well, these guys touched on it already. They refer to the Chambersburg Road as a revolving door. I like to think of it as a pinwheel.
Okay.
And what they were talking about is how on the south side of Chambersburg Pike, the Union guys are pushing Archer's guys back over Willoughby Run and back up onto Her Ridge, and whereas on the north side, the Confederates are actually outflanking the Union Army until we get involved with the railroad cut. When the Confederates get in that cut and the 6th Wisconsin comes from the seminary and flanks them and it becomes a trap, those Confederates that weren't captured, about 200-300 were, escape out the cut back toward the mountains. And this is when they report, this ain't no dang militia. Okay. This is the Army of Potomac. Says this is the point where they know that they're totally disabused of any notion that this is militia. They now know that it's their old nemesis, the Union Army of Potomac, that they're facing west of Gettysburg. This will trigger the return of the Confederates from the west that afternoon, but instead of 4,000 men, now they come with 14,000.
Okay.
It's going to be a different story in the afternoon.
And where are Lee and Hill?
Yeah,
while this is going on.
Lee and Hill. Hill's still Cashtown coming up. He supposedly, by the time that the initial action's over, he's probably at her tavern. Lee doesn't come up till later, and the timing is somewhat sketchy, but it's early afternoon by the time Lee's not even in Cashtown. So he has to get to Cashtown first and then come up.
So when Lee gets up here, what is his reaction to everything that's happened?
He's not real happy. He didn't want a battle, of course, as we know. He's waiting for his army to concentrate there, and he would probably have preferred to fight closer to Cashtown because he has the mountains there that he could use for whatever reason, security. So he's upset at this point that his army has blundered into a battle. He can't break it off. And so basically what he does now is order other troops to proceed to Gettysburg.
A little light on this. Was it Campbell Brown? What was his first
Campbell
name?
Brown.
Yeah, this is a staff member of Ewell and also family or stepson by marriage, but he was a son of a cousin anyway. It was all convoluted. But he
stepson and second cousin, I think,
at the same time.
Like that,
But he is looking for Lee to tell him what Ewell's two divisions are going to be doing, basically coming to Gettysburg. Yeah. And Lee is upset, asks, have you seen Stuart? Because he's coming from the north and east.
Yeah.
And make sure that Brown is going to go back and tell Ewell something along the lines of not bringing on an engagement until the whole army is up.
Yeah, Lee sent orders to Ewell the night before.
Right.
That you can march to Cashtown, or you can march to Gettysburg as the circumstances require.
Yeah.
And, of course, Ewell at this point is a little confused because he was told to march back on the other side of the mountains once initial contact was made. Once they found out that the Union Army's coming up into Pennsylvania, then Lee countermanded those orders and told him to stay on this side of the mountains, the eastern side. By that time, Johnson's division has already passed the point of no return. He's headed for the Scotland Mall at Chambersburg, and he can't be recovered at that point. And so Ewell's getting all these, kind of contradictory, confusing orders from Lee. And now Lee says, go to Cashtown or Gettysburg as the circumstances require. He says, what circumstances? He doesn't know.
Okay.
And in the morning, he's ready to march to Cashtown until word comes from Hill that he's involved with some troops down in Gettysburg. So he adroitly just orders his men to turn, and Biglerville Road, right here in front of me, behind you guys, that you're looking at me, Rhodes Division will come down there and early seamlessly turns on the Hagerstown Road. And so they're coming on roughly parallel roads. It couldn't have been done better.
Yeah.
You meant Harrisburg Road, though.
Harrisburg.
What did I say?
Hagerstown.
Harrisburg Road.
You got the first two letters right.
Yeah, I did, yeah. Yeah, I'm facing the wrong way here.
But the point is, Lee still is somewhat concerned. He doesn't know what he's up against, and that's all I was trying to.
And what's going on in the Union command at this point while the lull is going on?
confusion of command.
Okay.
Howard finally gets word that he's now in charge. He was at the, I guess he was at the Faunastock building when Craig
He was up at the observatory.
He said, Reynolds is down, and Howard looked down. He says, I hope the general can keep the field. Keep it. He's chewing on it. He's dead.
That was a paraphrase from Charlie Fennell, folks.
No, he's dead. He's dead.
Chewing
and so
on
he
it.
comes down, and he rides out, and he talks to Doubleday. And Doubleday explains to him, I think, that he has a great position, which he does, there on McPherson's Ridge, as long as it isn't flanked or turned. And he points to the hill we're sitting on, and he says, if the Confederates get that hill, my position becomes untenable.
Yeah.
And Howard says, not to worry, my corps is coming up, I'll just extend your line. So I think Howard's vision of the battle of Gettysburg would be that the Union line would extend all the way
All the way up
incorporate
here.
the hill we're sitting on as his right flank. But Rhodes gets here first.
Okay.
And so the 11th Corps is going to have to form in this low ground here north of town.
So the 11th Corps is coming up. He leaves a division on Cemetery Hill.
Yes.
Okay. So explain the thinking of doing that to people in the audience.
You want to take that one?
Well, he recognizes the value of the high ground south of town. And he thinks, if things don't go well, man, this would be a great place to fall back to. So there's always been this debate about who chose Cemetery Hill. Does Hancock get the credit or does Howard? I've always thought Howard should get the credit for choosing it because the fact that he left the 4,000 men, the two brigades as a reserve there, proves that he saw the value of the hill. So then the balance of the Corps will come out here north of town because now you've got Dole's Brigade of Rhodes Division, the biggest division in Lee's Army, and you've got part of the Alabama Brigade under O'Neill coming through the plains, the flat ground here north of town. So now, as Charlie indicated, now Howard, he can't move his men all the way up here to Oak Hill and put his right flank on this hill. He has to bend his line down here where the Mummersburg Road crosses Oak Ridge and then cover the north of town on this terrible ground to defend, flat, devoid of trees, very different from west of town where there's undulating ground and there's tree cover. And he anchors his right on the only thing out here north of town that resembles high ground. That's Barlow's Knoll. We're looking at about a mile out here right now, and that'll end up being the far right of the Union Army at the end of the day before they start to retreat.
So when do the hostilities resume, and what starts it?
I've never been real clear on that, Charlie. I would say 1 to 2:30.
Yeah, that's what I say.
Okay, 1 to 2:30, and what's the first action?
Rhodes' artillery here.
The artillery starts firing from here, and Rhodes and Ewell are up here. And, of course, as Bob had indicated, as Campbell Brown went to Lee and explained that Ewell was going to Gettysburg, and Lee says, fine. And he said before he left, he says, do be sure and make him clear that I do not want a general engagement today. So Campbell Brown comes back and tells them they're up here watching. They're watching the 11th Corps deploying these fields north of town.
Yeah.
And Hill's men have already been repulsed. And Ewell looked at Rhodes and says, I think a general engagement's already on.
Yeah.
So I think that this request is invalid. And Rhodes suggested, I think he was afraid that if we don't attack them, they're going to attack us.
And it looked like it.
Yeah,
because the 11th Corps is moving out.
Fields.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think Robinson's division is beginning to appear,
and Robinson's moving down here to extend the line north of the Chambersburg pike as well.
So Robinson's division is another division out of the First Corps. And they could see them coming up on the plain up here where we are.
On the ridge.
On the ridge. Well, yeah, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And then they're also seeing the 11th Corps down on the plain. That's what I meant. Down the plain below us.
Right.
So yeah, that does look kind of threatening to see all those troops coming at you.
Back to your original question, what initiates it is Rhodes attacks.
Okay.
He attacks with, let's say, 1, 2, 3, 4 brigades. He kept Ramseur in reserve. So
now, is this attack kind of go get him, or is it kind of planned out?
Well, I guess you could say it was planned, but it kind of went in staggered.
Okay.
Yes. It wasn't all one big line advancing like Pickett's charge.
Okay. So what is it? It like starts like left to right, or how does it go?
More right to left.
Right to left.
Daniels, and then he goes straight across the field. He heads essentially south.
He heads south.
Yeah, he's
toward the first day's action down to McPherson Farm.
And then Iverson kind of cuts behind him and heads kind of southeast. At the same time, behind us here in the low ground and lined up on this.
So
O'Neill.
Daniel is heading essentially towards the railroad cut and the McPherson farm.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then Iverson is heading towards the woods over there. Was that Sheeds Woods?
Sheeds Woods, exactly.
Sheeds
but
Woods.
I'm pretty sure Daniel was supposed to protect Iverson's right.
Yeah, he comes up. Daniels comes up a little bit later.
Daniel was a couple hundred yards behind Iverson and moves in after Iverson, but not long after.
So Iverson is the thrust of the attack up here.
Yes,
Up
but
here, up
O'Neill
here.
is supposed to be going, I think, about the same time as Iverson.
Right.
And then Daniel's going to come in to protect the flank.
Okay.
But part of the problem Daniel's going to have is that dang railroad cut area.
Yeah.
He could be hitting the flank, too.
So he's got two fronts that he's got to cover.
Exactly, and that's his problem all afternoon.
He's kind of facing the woods, I guess, and maybe Lee's headquarters in that direction.
and
then
of course,
also the railroad cut.
Right.
So basically southeast and south, roughly.
Right.
Is that right?
That's Daniel's problem.
Yeah.
Now, see, the undulation in the ground is going to be the problem. Because as Iverson moves towards the woods, which he believes there's some Union troops in those woods, and he wants to drive them out.
Right.
Okay, he can't see O'Neill, which is
Down below
east of
us.
him on the other side of the ridge we're sitting on.
Yeah.
Which is Oak Ridge. You can't see him.
Right.
Daniels, who's supposed to be on his right, is on another undulation on the other side.
Okay.
And he's starting to drift away from Iverson.
Yeah, he's starting to drift.
Right.
And he can't see Iverson move. Iverson is moving. Both of them are moving apart.
Because there's also the Forney farm and their buildings.
That's right.
That's not here today, but
Right.
that would have been. Would that have separated them, or were they not even?
No, I think Iverson comes right through the farm.
He goes right through the farm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Iverson doesn't parallel the undulations like Daniels.
Okay. Gotcha.
He comes across them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. All right.
So
Now,
a little different direction.
So you're saying he's focusing on Sheeds' woods.
I think so. Yes.
And that's why what happens is what you're saying. Okay. So what happens?
Well, O'Neill is down here below us. We're on Oak Ridge, okay, and the ground drops off really significantly and down here where the McLean farm is. So this is where O'Neill is, and Iverson's up here on top of the ridge. Can't really see each other. O'Neill goes in first. He hits the Mummersburg Road where the Union Army is. The Union Army is bent. They come up the Mummersburg Road, and then they go down Oak Ridge. Now today there's a road there, Double A Avenue, and it wasn't here at the time of the battle, but Iverson on the right, can't really see O'Neill on the left, vice versa. O'Neill moves forward, gets repulsed, falls back to the farm buildings here of O'Neill, and the Iverson's moving on his right with no support on his left. O'Neill on his left has already been repulsed.
Okay.
So now Iverson's going to get chewed up. So you got Daniels going all the way down there to where the fight had been in the morning. He's kind of out of the picture. Iverson is chewed up badly. O'Neill's been repulsed. But as Charlie said earlier, Rhodes does have a brigade in reserve, and it's Ramseur. Well, about this time, you've got Doles coming in here, which would have been to the left of where, on the plain north of town, just to the left of O'Neill. So we're going to put Dole's coming in, and then now, these Union soldiers out here on Oak Ridge, they've been fighting all day. They're starting to run low on ammunition. I read in some research I did for a program I did a couple years ago that those guys fired 100,000 rounds into that field where Iverson's men were, 100,000 rounds. So these guys are running out of ammunition. And then the weight of Ramseur's men, these reserves coming in, it's going to be what breaks the Union line. So Robinson's division, the Northern Division on Oak Hill, is going to have to start to fall back to the Sheeds Woods, and then they send the 16th Maine Regiment, basically sacrifice them. They sent them forward toward the Confederates to this intersection down here where Oak Ridge meets Mummersburg Road, basically just to slow the Confederates down, cover the retreat of everybody else.
So while all this is going on up here, what's going on at the McPherson area?
Well, now that's when you start to see some of the other divisions of Hill's Corps coming in behind, Heath's division, Pender's division. And now they're throwing their weight. There'd been 10,000 Union soldiers arrived under Reynolds infantry.
Right.
Well, they got chewed up. They won the morning fight, but they're chewed up. Now you got 14,000 fresh Confederates. So the Union Army is starting to fall back toward Seminary Ridge, the seminary. So they're starting to give way a little bit as this is starting to occur. And as Charlie said, what's happening here, there is one heroic Union unit we probably ought to mention that came up here to the McPherson farm, the 45th in New York.
Oh, yeah.
McLean farm.
Under a guy, was it Ursh?
Yeah,
that the
Captain
commander?
Hirsch.
Yeah.
And they're basically going to blunt some of Rhodes' assault, early assault toward the college down here.
McLean for him.
And buy time for the rest of the 11th Corps to get up here and set up north of town.
Yeah.
I think it's important, and we haven't talked about the arrival of Gordon's brigade or Early's division yet, but this is all happening at the same time.
Yeah.
It's, okay, Rhodes's attack started first, but it's going to be repulsed. Daniels is going to have 3 separate attacks trying to solve this dual problem of, I've got to take care of that flank fire I'm getting from the Chambersburg pike and from the railroad cut area, and I'm supposed to protect Iverson's left. Iverson just got decimated down here, okay? So, anyways, what you brought in Hill's men coming. It's not just Hill's men coming from the west. Now it's Ramseur helping Doles. I'm sorry, not helping Doles. Helping Rhodes to actually obtain his objective. And what we're probably going to get to next on your outline, Early's division is arriving at about the same time.
So go ahead, bring Early's division.
Well, let's Jim or
Early's
Charlie?
division is going to arrive about what, Charlie? 3:30? Would you say?
3:30, yeah.
And they're coming down the Harrisburg Road. So they're the extreme Confederate left, and they're opposite Howard's right. What's happening is they're going to connect with Doles. Doles is in the field north of town here. This is about the time Ramseur's moving forward and the Union Army's starting to give way. Now you've got Doles' men filling the plain north of town, and they're going to connect with, as Bob mentioned, Gordon's brigade of the 1st of Early's division. So now the Confederates, when they come down the Harrisburg Road, are well overlapping the Union right at Barlow's Knoll.
All right. And so you mentioned Barlow's Knoll. We call it Barlow's Knoll. It wasn't called Barlow's Knoll then.
Blocker's Knoll.
Blocker's Knoll. And why do we call it Barlow's Knoll now? Why did Barlow make that so famous?
Francis Barlow, New York general, in charge of these troops here.
Francis Channing. Let's not forget Channing. I hate everybody named Channing. Carol Channing, Channing Tatum, and Francis Channing Barlow.
Well, Blocker's Knoll here north of town is about the only thing that resembles high ground out here. And he doesn't, it's kind of like Sickles the next day. He doesn't want to get caught in this low ground out here. He sees the high ground in front of him. You're going to allow the Confederates to come and seize it, put their artillery in front of you. So he decides, I'm not going to do that. So he moves out in front. And he's actually moving beyond his support to the left on the west side of the Carlisle Road. He's out in an exposed position.
Okay.
And I'll never forget Kevin Cominera. One time, Charlie said this. He was doing a training seminar for doing staff rides, and he takes us over to Barlow's Knoll. There's a statue of Francis Barlow up there, and he's looking this way. He says, if you want to know what happened to Barlow, look at him. He's looking at the Carlisle Road. He's not seeing what's happening.
I love it. Thank you, Kevin. I'm going to use that on my next tour.
It's good stuff, isn't it?
That is good, yeah.
Think outside the bus and let Getty's Bike Tours show you the only way to truly experience Gettysburg. There's a reason why Getty's Bike Tours is the longest running bicycle tour company in Gettysburg, and that's because they put the customer's experience at the top of their list of priorities. Follow a licensed battlefield guide through some of the most legendary ground in American history. There's a tour route for everyone, from the newbie to the hardcore history buff. So go to gettysbike.com or call 717-752-7752 and book your reservation today. Mention addressing Gettysburg and receive 10% off your tour. That's gettysbike.com or 717-752-7752. Discount does not apply to rentals.
How should Barlow have placed his troops?
Well, Barlow, when he comes through town, okay, he's supposed to be the right flank of the line, and he's placed back by the college. They're watching the Harrisburg Road. He's under Schurz now because Howard's the wing commander. So Schurz has now got the corps, and he had come through town with Howard. And Schurz believes that he's supposed to protect the flank. He's got a refused flank. So if he stayed where he was, Early wouldn't have been able to get around him as easily. But like Jim said, he sees that a little bit of high ground. There's only a little bit of high ground out. It's the only high ground out there.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like a pimple.
You know, it's sort of like a New York lawyer thing. There's high ground. We got to go get it. Okay, how far it is in front. And so he moves out. And he moves out there. And he thought if he could put his artillery there, it's a great artillery position. Little realizing, I think, that Early's coming in and a road is going to take him behind that knoll. When he finds out, he's already committed himself.
Yeah.
And now he starts asking for help. He goes to Schertz, and Schertz said, "What are you doing out there?" And so they go to Howard, and Howard reluctantly will give one brigade of that division that's on Cemetery Hill. Custer's brigade.
Steiner's
Howard always
division.
going to do the worst thing. That's his operating procedure.
Always do the worst thing?
Yeah. Too little, too late.
Okay.
He should have sent the whole division out an hour earlier. That might have been better.
Right.
Or nobody.
Yeah, right.
But he doesn't. He does the worst thing. He sends one brigade too late. And so when Barlow gets out there, Early's men are able to hit him front and flank. And it's a violent, short action. And it's called Barlow's Knoll because that's where he was hit.
Okay.
He was wounded there, left for dead. But he's cantankerous. He lives through it.
They probably left him because his name was Channing.
That's probably true,
Channing
yes.
Barlow.
They said, leave him. His name is Channing. Forget
But anyway,
him.
that's where he goes down and his men. The thing to keep in mind, you got two brigades out here, Georgians.
Yeah.
Doles is coming down from the north, and Gordon is coming in from the east.
Right,
And
okay.
they hit the knoll, and the division that's on the knoll, Barlow's division, there is probably just a little over 2,000 men.
Yeah, the whole division.
The whole division.
Right. They're
Yeah,
small.
That's very small.
Yeah.
Remember, these guys survived Chancellorsville. And ironically, the same unit, whether it's at the 153rd Pennsylvania, that was on the right of Chancellorsville, is on the right here at Gettysburg first day. Okay, so they know the game. and those two brigades are going to roll up the entire 11th Corps because they take a regiment at a time,
Okay.
like a domino.
Yeah,
boom, boom,
yeah.
boom, boom, boom. And then the men in this field, the 11th Corps men, are like Barlow. They're looking this way. They're looking north. They're not looking to the east behind them. And that's where the threat comes.
So nobody's noticing this threat coming.
No, because
They're all like nobody turned around just to stretch or anything like that.
Well, imagine there's a few. What's over there? And eventually they realize they can't stay in this field, and they're going to fall back.
Charlie and Jim said Dole's brigade is coming at them.
Yeah, coming right
And
at
so
them.
your attention is there.
Okay,
And you're
okay.
hoping
Gotcha.
your
So
units
Dole's
to your
brigade is
right are
coming at
taking
them-
care of that end of the business, but they're not.
Dole's brigade is coming at them from what, like northwest?
From the north, almost due north.
Okay, due north.
But Early's hitting them from the northeast.
Yeah, Dole's was sent out there to reach out and touch Jubal.
There you go.
Because Ewell knew he was coming, so did Rhodes.
Right.
So all of a sudden you got Doles down there, and once O'Neill and all these guys are repulsed, he's down there by himself.
Okay.
Where'd everybody go?
So Doles is holding him by the nose while Early kicks him in the pants.
Yeah, right. He comes right behind.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's about the same time that the Confederates are coming off this hill right here, Oak Hill, and hitting the bend of the Union line right here
there.
where Mummersburg
Yeah.
Road crosses Oak Ridge. So, it doesn't really matter whether the First Corps in the afternoon gets flanked on their left. They do.
Yeah.
But once this part of the Union line, the right of Doubleday's men, is outflanked. Once the 11th Corps starts to fall back, the First Corps position along Seminary Ridge, Oak Ridge is no longer
It's
tenable.
no longer tenable, yeah.
Yeah,
And the same thing is
Pender's advancing at the same time.
Right. Okay, Pender's over on Chambersburg Pike
Lee's
now.
on the field. He didn't see the earlier repulse
of Heath. Heath's division?
No.
Oh, over here.
No.
Rhodes.
Roads. Okay,
I
of
got no
Roads.
trouble with my roads. I got Hagerstown. I got Harrisburg. I got all these roads.
Generals.
When are we going to get to the creeks? That's what I want. But anyway, so you got Rhodes. He's repulsed. Lee comes up, and they're explaining the situation, and they say, "Look, we have an opportunity here."
Yeah.
Okay, and so Lee tacitly gives his permission for Pender to go in, Heath to go in, and then Pender. So Heath makes a second attack along with Rhodes, and as Early's coming in. Now the First Corps is driven off McPherson's Ridge
Right.
by Heath.
Okay.
Or Heth, if you prefer.
I don't.
Okay,
I like Heath.
I call him Harry like
I don't
Lee,
like him
because I don't know if it's Heath or Heth either.
No, it's
All right?
Heath.
And so they're pushed back to the seminary. At that point, the 11th Corps is collapsing.
Okay. So
just in terms of numbers here, though, what are we talking about? Infantry versus infantry.
Oh, geez. Go
Rough
ahead.
numbers.
By the end of the day, all troops that have been in the battle, about 28,000 Confederates, about 20,000 Union.
Yeah, that's what I usually
it's
use
just,
too.
just okay, just a difference of 8,000. I always thought it was
the only
bigger.
day of the battle, the North is outnumbered.
Yes.
Okay.
Including cavalry on the Union side?
What is that, Jeff?
No, you'd
That's
have to.
including the cavalry from the Union when you say
No,
20,000?
the
No.
20,000 is just infantry.
Silly question, Jeff.
For 22.
So
Yeah,
add in
so
about
add
2,900
4,000.
maybe. But Buford's
About 2,800.
cavalry.
I'm sorry, 2,800.
Buford's cavalry, one of his two brigades is just scouting and protecting out here to the east. The other, that was Devon, the other, Gamble's, is on this ridge, also trying to buy time for the
but they're
retreat.
south of us.
They're south of us on
Yeah,
Seminary
they're
Ridge.
south of the
yeah, people
Fairfield
can't
Road.
see where I'm pointing, can they?
No, they can't. We can, but nobody listening can.
I can see your point. I can't see where you're pointing.
Yeah,
I'm not facing that way.
Basically, what you're saying is when the infantry comes up, Buford's cavalry is split to cover the flanks of the
Exactly.
Union line.
Exactly.
Left flank and right flank. All right, so we have a question. That's what it was.
Okay.
We have a question about Stone's brigade.
Where's Rich Corps?
Brian Emery asks, Stone's brigade gets overlooked in a lot of accounts of the battle. Could you discuss their action on the 3 days? Well, let's just stick with day one for this one. I know there is an account of the 150th capturing or recapturing a cannon. What battery was that from? And did they maintain it? Eric's shaking his head. Why are you shaking your head, Eric? Eric, the producer, taking the microphone.
I've heard that rumor milling about before. What it is, Hall's battery abandons a gun along the Chambersburg pike, but as far as I can tell, it was actually a disabled gun, which wasn't able to be dragged
Right.
off.
And Hall figured he'd
also
get it
wasn't
later, right?
within the purview of the 150th Pennsylvania to actually be physically near enough to that gun to actually do anything with it. Where the rumor really comes from is there was a story floating around starting in about 1881. A gentleman in Company F of the 150th named John Kenzel made a claim that okay, so the 150th Pennsylvania sends 3 companies to the north side of the Chambersburg Pike to assist in the withdrawal of the 149th Pennsylvania from the West Railroad cut. When that happens, the colors of the 149th Pennsylvania are still in the field. John Kenzel makes this claim that these colors are captured by rebels. Kenzel himself leads a small squad to recapture the colors and then returns them to the 149th. That doesn't happen. That never happened, and there was quite the tempest in a teapot over it between the veterans of the 149th and 150th in the 1890s, primarily. What actually happened was John Kenzel was wounded. He had been shot in the head before Company F was moved to the north side of the pike, and he wasn't even physically located with the company when all of this action supposedly occurred. And apparently this head wound had deeply affected him later in life. One of his comrades from Company F says in a letter to John Bossler that Jack seemed to be gone in the head. And so that's where this comes from. It stems from a story that John Kenzel basically fabricated around 1881 in Indiana at a reunion, and was fought over for 20 years by the men of the 2 regiments.
It's interesting.
Yeah, I think
okay.
the Stone's brigade has the worst position.
Yeah, go into that a little bit.
They're like the letter Z.
Uh-huh.
Okay, because they're facing the west, they're facing the north. They're at the hinge, the Union line. There's 2 McPherson's ridges. There's McPherson's west and McPherson east, and they're linking. They're on the west ridge, and
Which is where the barn is.
Which is the barn? Yeah, it's on the west ridge.
Yeah.
And they're a regiment that's 150th, which is facing
West.
They're facing Hill's Corps.
Right.
And then they link to McPherson's east, which is the line that's right the railroad cut.
Right. So
they're getting fired from 2
Stone's
sides.
Brigade's got what? 3 regiments, right?
3
Correct.
regiments.
And one of them is facing west, 2 are facing north.
Yes.
Okay.
That's correct.
And
Well, depending on what part of the fight you're talking about.
Well, that's
Well, but I
Originally,
mean, like,
they're all
originally,
facing west,
Right.
Yeah.
but here's the problem with Stone's Brigade and why Charlie says it's such a hard thing. Because when Rhodes's division is going to come off of this hill, or even before that, when the artillery of Carter's battalion, the Confederate artillery from this hill, hits them, they can hit right down the end of their line, enfilade fire. Okay, so they're gonna relocate, like Charlie said, like a letter L or Z. It's at an angle. So you've got one regiment facing one way and two other regiments facing north.
Yeah, right. Okay.
So the 149th and 143rd are facing north, and the 150th still faces west.
Okay.
And then they keep getting attacked. I mean, these three different attacks of Daniel's brigade, the Confederate brigade, which has to contend with this. At one point, they're just fighting the 149th and 143rd, which are like linking the two ridges of McPherson's Ridge. But at one point, even the 150th, which had been facing west, is going to kind of wheel to their right and help stop one of these attacks of Daniel's. So it's kind of like if you're at the peach orchard the next day.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's
you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Any way you look, you got people coming at you.
Yeah. Sickles basically just has a longer version of that line.
Yes,
in a sense, yeah. And Sickles didn't have
for the next day.
And Sickles didn't have authorization to go there. Stone was placed there.
Well, and our boy Channing too, going out to that hill. Yeah. Jesus.
He didn't necessarily have authorization to do that either.
No, exactly.
Right.
That's what I'm saying.
But I mean,
like Sickles.
Poor Roy Stone was placed there.
Yes.
And then he will go down. Well, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm just saying they go through. I think they end up with 3 brigade commanders, don't they, in this afternoon's time?
Yeah, right.
So then, why? Why do they end up? What does Stone's brigade go through? I mean, the artillery. You know,
they're on fire. If they're not being attacked by infantry, the artillery's hit them.
Right. They're just in a horrible spot.
Yeah, they are. They're right in the middle of it all.
And they're going to be taking part in the next 2 days of battle, or not?
Well, the First Corps is going to be holding Cemetery Ridge, or behind it, for the rest of the battle.
They're decimated. We lost 50% casualties.
I know the Stone's Brigade is on basically the south end of the line around the angle, closer towards the Pennsylvania Memorial now, really right next to the Vermont Memorial. They talk about taking casualties from artillery fire during the cannonade, but they're not directly engaged with any infantry during the attack.
Okay. So the Union line is starting to crumble. There's this big debate on does it start crumbling on the right, which is the 11th Corps, or does it start crumbling on the left, which is the 1st Corps? And I think you guys kind of answered it. It seems to me it's like right here is where it kind of starts, and then Early delivers the fatal blow over on the right.
Yes.
Okay, but again, you point out that Pender over on the Confederate right, or the Union left, against the Iron Brigade in the woods, and all the troops over there that were part of the morning's fight. Pender's division is fresh, and so he's going to be pushing them back. But there's a last stand made or attempted on Seminary Ridge, or at the seminary. Go into that a little bit.
Well, that's the remnants of the First Corps that fell back there, and they tried to make a stand. Doubleday wanted to pull back earlier, but Howard kind of vetoed that early. You're going to hold on to all the ground. But anyhow, as they get back there, there's very little of them left. They're pretty shot up. Remember, the First Corps is going to take 49.7% losses in this battle. And they aren't involved much on the second and third days, except for the Vermont Brigade. You know, so most of those casualties occurred on July 1.
Mm-hmm. Like the Iron Brigade, for example, what did they have, 1,800 or so when they went in?
They went in with 1,919. They lost 1,212 of them.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah,
that's
over 50%.
Crazy.
This is where the Iron Brigade's pretty much history ends.
Yeah.
Is at Gettysburg. There's really not much of them left after Gettysburg. But anyway, you got back, and what they did was they mounted artillery. There on either side of the Chambersburg pike, 18 guns were lined up near the Craw House. Okay, and so as Pender's men are coming across, Scales is going to rock right into that. North Carolinians, they're the left flank of that attack. They're going to be decimated by this artillery.
Okay,
but it's Perrin in the center, South Carolinians. They're going to break through the seminary line. Perrin told his men not to fire until they were ordered to. And they get very close to the Union line, they open fire, and then they rush it. And they break through right at the seminary.
Okay.
We used to call it the tennis court battle until they took the tennis courts out and put a parking lot in. But anyway, that's where they're going to break through. And then south of that, you have Thomas and Lane. Lane kind of falling in behind. He's actually south of the Fairfield Road. He's going to be held up by Buford's cavalry. Gamble's brigade is behind a stone wall there at the what is that? The Schultz house. Yeah, the Schultz house, and there were some mounted, and supposedly, and this is the official records, Lane thought they were going to charge, so he formed a square.
Yeah. Now, is there controversy over that? Because I hear some people go, "Nah, they're bad," but then other people say, "Yeah, they did," because it's in the reports.
Most of the accounts say he did.
Yeah,
and it would be on the farm there. It's behind the North Carolina Memorial. But anyway, they went in a square, you don't move.
Right.
And so Buford, just by threatening a charge, perhaps stopped one entire brigade from moving forward. There's not much in front of him.
Yeah.
There's not much in front of him.
So you're saying that was further down by the North Carolina monument, behind
pretty close,
like McMillan Woods, that area.
Down in that area.
Okay, that's interesting.
So that line was pretty long.
Yeah.
I mean, this attack's pretty long.
All right.
But once the seminary line is taken, your next stop is Cemetery Hill.
Right.
Now, the way I see it is Heath drives the First Corps off McPherson's ridges back to the seminary. Okay, then you have this attack coming in on the flank and breaking this line, along with Early coming in and breaking the 11th Corps. The First Corps said they saw the 11th Corps run. You can't see them run from McPherson's ridges.
Okay.
You can see them run from Seminary Ridge.
Right.
You can't see them run from the other two.
Yeah.
So they're already back on Seminary Ridge when they see the 11th Corps break.
Okay. Gotcha.
Okay.
So, the 11th Corps breaks. First Corps is going to break. Now, the 16th Maine, when are they ordered to make their stand again?
Once the retreat begins.
Once the retreat begins. So, go through this again. What is it that they're told to hold off?
Well, they're told to advance, as Jim was saying. They're told to advance to this road right here, the Mummersburg Road.
As everybody else is falling back.
They're all falling back, and they're moving forward. And they're supposed to hold on as long as they can to allow Robinson's division to because you got Confederates behind Robinson's division.
Yes,
so
right.
Robinson has to run south to go east.
Yes, I gotcha.
Yeah,
right.
And so they're going to hold.
All right. So let me just for the people listening, because I know it's probably confusing.
Okay, it's to be too.
Oh yeah. Okay.
What's to do?
So imagine there's how do you even explain this? Well, basically, what you're saying is you have a line, for argument's sake, that's running north and south, but facing west.
Yes.
And then at the end of that line, the right of that line, it's connecting to the 11th Corps and its left, which is running east-west.
Yes.
Right.
Okay, and facing north.
Yes.
Right, you got it.
Okay. Now, the Confederates push in the 11th Corps from the east, northeast, something like that, right? Which is then crumbling into the backs of the northernmost end of the First Corps line,
Robinson's division.
So he has to go south,
to get out
in order to get the hell out. Because the instinct, I guess, would be to just run straight back to town from here.
Right.
But he can't do that because there's Confederates that are running towards him.
Right.
So he's got to run away from them and then around them.
Yeah.
Okay. So hopefully that didn't make it more confusing to the people at home.
Well, the 16th Maine is going to retreat south along Oak Ridge till they get to the railroad cut.
Right, and then what happens at the railroad cut?
They get in the railroad cut and they realize they're cut off.
Yeah, so they make the same mistake the Mississippians made earlier.
Yeah, but
well, they probably didn't really have much of a choice,
colonel,
right?
What's his name? Starts with a T.
Tilden.
Tilden. Thank you. I always want to call him Tipton. That's a photographer.
Yeah.
Tilden, and Tilden called for the flags, and they ripped the flags up, and they gave each man a piece of the flag, so they wouldn't have to surrender them. And then supposedly he said, "I'll see you in hell or on the Union line." So they all kind of
It's like every man for himself,
and kind of went back through time. Many of them were captured.
What was the numbers? I think when they got back on Cemetery Hill and they did a roll call, there was like 212 out of like 240 guys were gone.
Yeah.
According to Fonts, I'm looking at it in
go
Fonts
ahead.
anyway.
Yeah.
They had 39 on Cemetery Hill of the 275.
Right.
77%.
Yes.
Casualties. Most of those captured, but still.
Captured still, yeah.
77%.
But supposedly they never had to surrender their flags.
Yeah.
And as legend has it, in a reunion in Maine after the war, the men got together and reassembled the flags.
Do you believe that?
No, I don't. Because I had a guy on a tour once who had an ancestor in the regiment. He had a piece of the flag.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah, he had a piece of the flag.
Did he have it with you to show you on the tour? Oh, that is way cool, Charlie.
Yeah, he had a little pamphlet that the association put out. I think it was his great-grandfather's. And he had a piece of the flag.
And did you take it into the railroad cut with him? You should have done that.
I offered him $1 for it. $1? No, I'm just kidding. No, but it was a very moving experience. But yeah, so I know. I think in Maine there's like 4 or 5 pieces of it in a museum.
Yeah, can I just use this opportunity then to just get a big picture here?
Speak into the mic, Bob. There you go.
Use this opportunity to get the big picture here. Is that better?
Yeah. Because you're like this. You're like, oh, just like
the Union forces are fighting with a tenacity at this battle that I think the Southerners have not seen before this. Right. You think of all the stories of valor on this field. We just mentioned the 16th Maine, but the Iron Brigade, Charlie gave you the numbers for the whole brigade. The 24th Michigan lost 73% of their men, too, yes. I think. The 157th...
490 went in, 363 casualties.
Okay, there you go.
Highest numerical loss in the Union Army.
God. And the 157th New York, which is part of the damn Dutch, as the 11th Corps was sometimes called, or the Flying Crescents, they lost close to 75% of their men. So there's
Flying Dutchman.
The Flying Dutchman, yeah. There's incredible deeds of valor on this field on the first day of the battle. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I'm glad we're spending a whole episode.
Yeah, me too.
Let's just point out the 11th Corps didn't go easily.
Right.
I mean, when Gordon struck Barlow's Knoll, Georgia Regiment, I think it was up against the New York Regiment, the flag carriers are actually fighting with the flags.
Wow,
that's how much they held.
Yeah,
but their situation was untenable.
Right. Yeah, and the 11th Corps gets a lot of blame.
Yes.
At Culp's Hill, I think it was the 82nd Illinois, which is part of the 11th Corps, is going to be fighting that next night at Culp's Hill,
right?
Helping out over there. And I'm Charlie. If you know the story I'm going to, you do it. A conversation between Colonel Solomon of the 82nd Illinois and someone, I don't know who it is, of the 12th Corps. And maybe if I'll tell you the rest of the story, because you're looking at me like maybe. Yeah. I don't know who the colonel was anymore of the 12th Corps, but comes to him in the darkness after the repulse of the attack on July 2nd at night and says to Colonel Solomon something like, "Good fighting. And if you would have been out there yesterday instead of the damn 11th Corps, we would have held."
Yes.
And the colonel says something like, "You are a miserable hound, sir.
Yeah.
I am of that 11th Corps, and we fought no worse yesterday than we did tonight."
Yeah, it was Charles Horton, I think.
There you go.
He was the adjutant of Green's Brigade.
Of Green's Brigade? Okay.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, you guys can correct me on this, but it seems to me I read one time that the first day alone, taken alone, would have been like the 17th largest battle of the war.
Oh, that was one of the questions we had.
Yeah.
So good.
Yes. And I think what you need to remember about the first day is that while it's a tactical defeat for the Union Army, they give ground and fall back and the Confederates capture the town. In the larger strategical picture, it's really a victory for the Union. Because what happens? They retreat 2 miles south of town, and I'm looking at Cemetery Hill, and it's actually higher than where we are right now. We're on Oak Hill. The northern end of the battlefield is the highest point in the first day's field.
Yeah.
So the Union Army retreats to higher ground. That night, they get more heavily reinforced than the Confederates.
Right.
For the next 2 days, the Union has the advantage in numbers. And they only have the advantage in numbers and the high ground. This is when they start to form the fishhook, the 3-mile-long line along high ground. The Confederates will attack that fishhook the next 2 days, and their inability to drive the Union Army off of that is what ultimately gives the Union the turning point victory in the war here. And it's all made possible by 20,000 Union soldiers out here west and north of town, sacrificing 50% of their number.
Yeah.
But they fall back to a better position and hold it for the rest of the battle.
Was that the strategy? Was that, like, this wasn't meant to be held for however many days the battle was going to be? The idea was basically to do an infantry version of what Buford did for the infantry, and that is to slow or at least buy time for the rest of the army to get closer. Is that, or is that just the way it ended up?
I don't know if anyone had that strategy in their mind. That's how it turned out.
So Howard wasn't thinking that.
The roads.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
The roads.
Okay.
The road network.
Because you march apart, you fight united. March divided, fight united. Where the roads come together is key.
Okay, yeah.
That's where you bring the forces together. 10 roads converge on this town. Why is Buford out here? If the high ground's there, why isn't he on the high ground?
The roads.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the roads. He's protecting the roads.
Okay.
Because he can give ground and still protect the roads until he can get help.
And you asked that earlier, Matt. You said, why Gettysburg? Well, that's what Charlie's talking about. It's the same thing with the roads. There are 10 to 12 roads that come out of this town like one of these hubs on our cannon carriages. And the roads act like a magnet to bring the two armies here to make contact here, and it grows from there.
Yeah.
So the road network's very, very important.
Yeah,
Like one of our what carriages?
Our cannon carriages.
Carrying carriages. What do you call
Cannons,
artillery?
Bob. There's those big guns on the wheels.
I thought you were pointing at your car. And I'm thinking, how did you get here today?
That doesn't have as many spokes.
Yeah.
Yeah, what kind of? What are you driving, like an old 1903 model, whatever the hell it is?
You know what? I shouldn't bring this up, but I will, because I got him right here next to us.
Oh, no.
This is back in the guide room years ago, and we're sitting around and we're debating. Would Gettysburg have been a bigger town if it hadn't been for the battle, or would it be a smaller town? And I remember Charlie said it would have been a smaller town. If it weren't for the battle, it wouldn't have been as big. And I've always thought just the opposite. I've always thought that because of the road network, it probably would have been bigger like York.
Yeah.
But we've got 6,000 acres that don't allow industry to come in here and really develop.
I think if there was no battle, we'd be sitting in a strip mall right now.
I don't know. What do you think, Charlie?
Yeah, I still believe what I said.
You still think it would have been a
Really?
smaller, insignificant town?
No, I wouldn't say insignificant. Yeah.
If
All
there had been no
right.
battle?
But
So I'm going to try to interject to move us just along. I know you hate when I do this,
No,
Matt,
no.
But
Yeah.
to see if we can get a debate going between you two licensed battlefield guides and get us back on topic. It's 4:35, somewhere in that
yeah.
range of the afternoon of Wednesday, July 1st, 1863. The Confederates are entering the town.
Yes.
The Union 1st and 11th Corps are retreating pell-mell through the town, and some of them are putting up some resistance, yes.
Yes.
They're falling back to Cemetery Hill.
Right.
Robert E. Lee is going to send an oral order to Richard Ewell. What was that order, and what would you guys have done?
Oh,
Yeah.
take that hill if practical. Do not bring on a general engagement. It's just like Charlie said earlier, the day before when Ewell gets those orders. Well, if this isn't a general engagement, then what the heck is?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, right.
Right.
So, Ewell's men are exhausted. Two of the divisions have marched about 15 miles in hot, humid weather, fought all day. When they get into the town, the buildings are breaking up the formations. They're trying to capture Union soldiers. They don't know exactly what's behind the Union line. Only 2 of the 7 corps have actually fought here on the first day. And Johnson's division hasn't even arrived. 1/3 of your entire corps. So you have to, we look at it sometimes from hindsight and say, oh, that's what he should have done. And I would say that probably, looking back today, that we could say that probably was the best chance the Confederates had when they had the Union Army in disorder, defeat, demoralization, all the bad Ds at the end of the first day. But you have to look at it from Ewell's point of view at that time. And personally, I don't blame him. I think he's getting pretty general orders from General Lee, and he's used to taking pretty specific orders from Stonewall Jackson. He didn't hear anymore.
Big difference there. Yeah, Ewell was recommended, if you could take that hill to advantage, then do so, but do not bring on a general engagement until the rest of the divisions of the Army are here. Because Lee doesn't know what's on the other side of that ground. You can't see it from here either.
Right.
He doesn't know what's there. You got 2 corps of the Union Army. Where are the rest of them? Don't know. Don't know. Lee becomes almost McClellan-like, and I didn't say that. Okay? He becomes cautious, hesitant, because he doesn't have information.
Sure.
Okay? And so he lets it up to Ewell. Ewell looks at it. He's getting ready to attack, and he sent word to Lee that it would be a good idea if Hill would join me. If you're going to attack a salient, you want to hit it from both sides. Because if not, that gives the defender the advantage of shifting men from one side to the other rather quickly.
Right.
So this is a very practical request by Ewell. Lee referred it to Hill. And Hill said, my divisions are too exhausted and fought out for this. And so Ewell's on his own. This is when Culp's Hill comes into it. It seems that the Confederates have determined that Culp's Hill's not occupied. If we can take that hill, we make Cemetery Hill untenable. So he suggested to Early that maybe you ought to take that hill. And Early said, well, my men are still, disorganized in the town. I won't do it. And then word comes that there's Union troops coming down the York Pike, which is Route 30.
Right.
Which is wrong.
Yeah. We're not on the York Pike. They're on the Hanover Road.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
But this is the 12th Corps. 12th Corps was supposed to come north of Baltimore Pike and connect with Barlow's Knoll.
Okay.
They don't realize that the line has collapsed.
So they're just still on their way.
They actually deployed to move on Benner's Hill. If you've ever been to Benner's Hill,
it's a beautiful view.
It's just like this view here.
Yeah, exactly. You
That
can
would be-
see this from there.
That would have been Williams' division.
that would have been Williams'
Yeah,
division,
half
and
of the 12th
that would have
Corps.
caught the Confederates in a fishbowl
Right.
in the town.
Right. And when Ewell gets this information erroneous that there's a Union Corps coming in his rear,
Yes.
what does he have to do if you're going to be practicable?
Yeah. So he goes to Early. Said, well, Early says it's Exeter Billy Smith, and I don't give it much credence because he doesn't have much respect for Exeter Billy Smith. But he says we can't afford not to check it out.
Right.
And said he told him to check it out, and then Ewell went to try and get Rhodes' division ready to attack the hill,
Cemetery Hill.
Cemetery Hill. In the meantime, what Early does is take Gordon's brigade and moves it out. So he took a whole brigade out of the attack.
To protect the flank. And whose job should that have been?
Should have been Stewart.
But he's not here
He's not
yet.
here.
Right.
That's right.
And neither is the 3rd Division, Johnston's. As we sit here, it's 8:43. It's getting dark.
Mm-hmm.
Johnston's division is arriving finally on the first day. It's getting dark. He does send some men up to Culp's Hill. And who does he find there, and how did they get there?
Well, he finds elements of the 7th Indiana. When Hancock arrives, as he will, he's sent by Meade. Meade probably doesn't really have much faith in Howard, perhaps, but Hancock knows what Meade's intentions are. So you go down there and assess. Now, he relies on Reynolds. Reynolds is dead. So I got to have someone there I trust to make it. I can't leave Tawnytown yet. I can't leave it. So Hancock comes down, and he starts to organize the defense of Cemetery Hill. Then he looks around, he says, oh my God, there's a hill over there.
Yeah.
And that's Culp's Hill.
Because that's not a big deal to them at first.
Not at first, no.
Right.
No. And so he sends Wadsworth's division to secure the hill, and most of it will be between Cemetery Hill and the top of Culp's Hill.
So,
Which would be west.
like the Stevens Knoll.
Yeah, Stevens
in
Knoll,
there.
that sort of thing. The
Where their markers are now, right? Yeah.
And
Okay.
the 7th Indiana is going to be kind of the regiment from the top of the hill all the way down to Rock Creek. That's a big regiment.
So
It's
they're
528 men.
Okay. But that's
it-
still pretty thin to be
It's
spread.
pretty thin, but it's
Yeah.
dark. It's dark.
Right.
And so Johnson sends troops up there to see if the hill's still unoccupied. And they run into these people in the dark, and they don't know it's just one regiment.
Right. Right.
And so
right.
they come back and tell them the hill's occupied.
Yeah.
So any attempt to take that hill without having to fight for it till the rest of the divisions of the Army are here is gone.
And so Hancock should receive some credit
I think so.
for this establishment of the fishhook as well.
Yeah, I think he's the architect of it.
Right. And
Yeah.
what else, what does his mere presence do to the demoralized and outnumbered Union forces?
Well, they all the cell phones got wet when they crossed the Potomac. And so if Hancock's here, his 2nd Corps is not far behind. And so I think just, here, that's Hancock. Well, the 2nd Corps is probably not too far away.
10,000 more men.
Yeah, yeah.
And actually, the closest corps at that time is
3rd Corps.
well, okay, because you're counting Slocum is already here. he's not been engaged, but the 12th Corps was actually closer.
The 3rd Corps are about the same.
Yeah. And if I'm not mistaken, Slocum is a little reluctant to actually come onto the field because
he's actually reluctant to take command, not come on the field.
Okay, to take command, right.
Yeah,
who is that? What Howard saying you should take command, Henry? Or
no, because he realized that Meade had sent Hancock to assume command.
Right.
He didn't want to
step on
in, so to speak.
Oh, okay.
So
Gotcha.
and then when he found out that Hancock said, "Well, you're supposed to take command once you get here," then he comes up and takes command.
And is there an issue between Hancock and Howard about the taking command?
Absolutely.
Or, there is.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. How's that go?
Well, Howard alleges that they divided the authority. That Hancock took one side of the Baltimore Pike, and I was commanding the other side. Hancock says, "No, I was in charge of it all."
Well, he had a note, didn't he?
He had a note
from me that says I trust this guy, and when he arrives, he takes command by my special order.
Yes. Right.
Because Howard outranked him by seniority, right?
Just about everybody did.
Yeah.
Except for Sykes. Because Hancock's a fairly new corps commander.
Right. He was right. So he was a division commander up until Couch resigned. Back in May or something.
In Chancellorsville. So this is first corps command right here.
So, and then doesn't Hancock say, "I have orders from General Meade if you'd like to see them," and Howard says, "No, that's fine."
That's fine. Yes.
So Howard acquiesced.
Right.
He didn't even bother to read it or question it. He just said, "Okay, go ahead."
Yeah.
But then later on, he's trying to say, we split it.
Well, he's a little upset probably at the time.
Well, I'm sure.
They won't face one another today.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they're back to back. They won't look at one another even today.
He's talking about to go up on the cemetery.
The statues.
Look at them.
That's good, Charlie.
That's true. They will.
Hey, can I ask you too? This is actually a question that Matt asked me when we did a first day thing like this a year ago, but you never broadcasted. I don't think.
Yeah, I did.
Oh, you did?
Well, I don't know what the question is.
Well, the question is this: who were the for both sides, North and South? Give me a hero and a goat.
That wasn't my question.
I thought it was. I give you credit for it. I like that question.
I'll take it.
I remember my answer, and I like my answer.
Well,
but
before we get to that, because we're not finished with the day yet. So let's finish the day, and then let's do the hero goat, because I like that question. Hancock comes up. He kind of shores up the lines. Does Meade get up on July 1st?
Doesn't arrive until about midnight.
So he gets up very late.
Yeah.
Okay. Lee, what is Lee doing with the Army? What's his plan for the next day?
To attack.
Find
a place.
Oh, find a place to
Get
attack.
the men here and then continue the battle.
Who's not here yet?
Well, Pickett's not here for one, and Longstreet is just arriving.
Right.
So the first corps is just coming on the field.
Okay.
And a division of each of the other corps haven't been involved.
Right. Yeah,
Johnson and Anderson.
So he's got a good handful of fresh divisions.
Yeah.
6.
All right, now let's set the stage for tomorrow, July 2nd. Okay, we just said we have 6 fresh divisions of the Confederate Army coming up.
If you count Stuart.
Right.
Okay, if we count Stuart.
Yeah. They're not fresh. They haven't fought, but they're not fresh. Well, they fought at Hanover.
Yeah. That's true.
The Union Army's coming up, the Confederate, everybody's converging on Gettysburg.
Right.
And Lee wants to attack. He just doesn't know where.
Right.
What does he do to figure out where?
Well, he sends out scouts.
Scouts, okay.
Yeah,
and
that would be the famous, Captain Johnson and Major Clark, supposedly going to Little Round Top, coming back and telling him.
That's just a preview for tomorrow.
Right.
Don't give it away. It's only July 1st here, Charlie.
July 1st. But it's in the evening,
Yeah. All right, so let's go to Bob's question then and wrap this up. Bob, ask the question one more time, please.
Okay, as our friend Jeff pointed out, our younger viewers might think a GOAT is something good like greatest of all time. That's not how I'm using the term. I'm asking you to name one Union and one Confederate that was really praiseworthy, the most praiseworthy hero, or most responsible for the victory, if you want, and then one GOAT, one guy who messed up here on the first day.
Any level of command, or
how about down to colonel? Colonel and up.
Well, I'd be interested to hear what he would say either way.
Yeah. Well,
Well,
looking at the Union,
it's
I
a
think
4-hour show.
You'd have to say that there were a lot of heroes on the Union side. It's hard to find a goat other than, I would have to probably say either Barlow or Howard would be my goat. Probably Barlow would be the big goat for the Union. Heroes abound at all levels. Overall, I'd have to say probably, it's really difficult to finger anybody, but I would probably have to say that Buford certainly did a good job here, put himself in harm's way. Mm-hmm. Without the expectation perhaps of support, so that took a gutsy move on his part. So I would go with the two B's, B and B. I would go with Buford and Barlow. Mm. On the Confederate side, my hero, the greatest, the guy that did the best here, would probably, I would have to say, overall, would probably be Rhodes, because he was in the worst situation, kind of caught between it, and so I'd say he would be, and the goat, I'd go with Heath, good old Harry.
With who?
Heath. Harry Heath.
Harry Heath.
Yeah, bringing on a battle. Yeah, wandered in and taking it nonchalant and getting his division all chewed up.
Right.
There, so that's what
and then get hit in the head.
Yeah, get shot. Yeah. That was the next day. Who am I?
Jim, let's see you.
Wait, that was the next day that he got hit?
No, it was the first.
Oh, yeah. I thought you just said this. Okay, sorry. Good, Jim.
Okay, I've had time to think about it. How about Rowley being the GOAT? The guy's like drunk under Double A's division.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, I'll go with him.
How about old Rowley from Pittsburgh?
I don't like being critical of guys because I hate to criticize Barlow because I think he was in a tough position to begin with. Yeah. On the Union side, obviously Buford, but I give a lot of credit to Hancock. And I'll tell you why. When Hancock arrives, remember I said all those bad deeds are in effect? He's up on Cemetery Hill, sees the Union Army streaming back to him in defeat and disorganization. And a lot of guys would have just said, that's it, we're out of here. Let's just keep going, guys. And he looks at the ground and says, no, just stop right here. We're going to make a stand right here. So I think you have to give Hancock credit for that, even though I give Howard the credit for choosing position. One of my favorite generals I really like is the guy that unhinged the Union line over there on the right, and that's Gordon coming down the road. I thought he performed very well. He had good support on his right with Dulles, no question about it. Confederate GOAT, right down here, guys, O'Neill's brigade, Brigadier General. Somewhat impetuous to attack, doesn't really know what's going on his right with Iverson, gets repulsed, falls back. When Iverson moves forward, he has no support on his left, and the whole thing just falls apart. So there you go.
Okay.
I'm going to chime in real quick.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's a little bit outside the box or outside of the 25-mile square area of the fighting.
Okay.
GOAT for the Confederates, Jeb Stuart, in his absence.
Yeah, very good.
Hero for the Confederates, it's a little harder, but I really like the way Ramseur splits his brigade. You said before, Charlie, you hit a salient from both sides, and that's what he's doing at the same time.
Yep.
And he cracks the nut right in the middle, which it needs to be.
Yep.
And for the Union, I wanted to say Barlow because had he been closer to town, the distance between those three roads that he had to cover converging on the town would have been less.
Yes.
But Barlow's already been mentioned. Rowley's already been mentioned, so I don't know if I'm going to be able to come up. Oh, Slocum, just because he was so slow to come here. You know, the 12th Corps was 2 taverns was not that far away, and I think they were there by noon or maybe even before noon. They started to take a 2-hour break at 2 taverns. Okay, and Jim, I started with this. You'll love this. The hero for the Union, although I love always Hancock, George Meade. He stays in his lane. He knows his strengths are of a administrator, and Hancock is a natural leader of men. And so he resists the temptation to personally come to the field. He takes care of all those things he's good at once he finds out that Reynolds is dead. So
those are good choices, Bob.
Good choices.
Really good. I'm impressed.
Well, we have reached the end of the first day.
I hear the bell tolling.
The bell is tolling over at the college. That's right.
Is that the seminary? No, that can't be the seminary.
No, it's the college.
It's the college.
Yeah.
Look at.
So it must be 9 o'clock then. I think that's what that means.
Yeah, it does.
We thank you all for submitting your questions. Charlie, thank you very much. Jim, thank you
Thanks
very
for
much.
asking.
Thanks for having me.
Bob, thank you as always.
Thank
Eric,
you,
thank
man.
you for putting this together.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Eric.
Jeff, thank you for the loan of your table so we could put the pizza boxes on it.
Jeff.
That's the most important guy right there.
Yeah, Jeff. And thank you all for listening, and we will talk to you tomorrow for the July 2nd episode. Thanks. All right.
I can't wait till tomorrow. I wonder how it's all going to turn out.